Go to the oldest church you can find, not a modern megachurch with stadium seating and LED screens, not a suburban chapel built in the 1970s with architectural ambitions that stopped at the parking lot. The oldest one, the stone one, the one that's been standing since before your great-great-grandparents were born. Walk around it. Walk all the way around, and count the windows on each side. The south side will have windows, large ones, often the most elaborate ones, stained glass if the church could afford it. Tall, arched openings designed to let in maximum light. The east end, behind the altar, will have a window, often the most important window in the building. The west end, above the entrance, will usually have a window or a rose window, and the north side will have nothing, or almost nothing. Small openings, if any. Narrow slits, minimal glass. Sometimes no windows at all, just a blank stone wall stretching the full length of the building. Every old church, every medieval cathedral, every ancient chapel across Europe, across Britain, across every territory where Christianity built its houses of worship before the modern era. The north wall is blind, the south wall is open. The pattern is so consistent, so universal, so architecturally deliberate that once you see it, you can't unsee it, and nobody talks about it. This raises a simple but critical question. Why would the builders of the most important structures in their communities, buildings that represented the highest expression of their architectural knowledge, buildings that took generations to complete, deliberately leave one entire wall without windows? The official explanation is practical. The north side of a building in the northern hemisphere receives the least direct sunlight. Windows on the north wall would let in cold without letting in warmth. Medieval buildings were expensive to heat. Minimizing openings on the cold side was simple energy efficiency. The north wall was blank because blank walls are warmer walls. Architecture, thermodynamics, nothing more. And that explanation is not wrong. The north wall does receive less sunlight. Minimizing openings does reduce heat loss. Medieval builders were practical people solving practical problems with limited resources. The thermal explanation accounts for part of the pattern, but the deeper I went, the more the thermal explanation started to explain less than it needed to. Because medieval builders also constructed great halls, manor houses, and civic buildings with windows on all four sides. They knew how to build north-facing windows when they wanted to. The technology wasn't lacking. The skill wasn't absent. They chose not to put windows in the north wall of churches specifically. The blank north wall wasn't a general architectural practice applied to all buildings. It was a specific practice applied to sacred buildings. And specific practices applied to sacred buildings aren't about thermodynamics. They're about theology. The silence was deafening when I started looking at what the north side of a church actually meant in medieval Christian theology. Because the symbolism is documented. It's in the liturgical texts. It's in the sermons. It's in the writings of the church fathers and the instructions given to builders. And the symbolism is remarkably explicit. The north was evil, not metaphorically evil in the way that modern language softens everything into abstraction. Theologically evil, cosmologically evil. In medieval Christian cosmology, the compass points carried spiritual significance that governed every aspect of sacred architecture. The east, where the sun rises, represented Christ, the resurrection, the light entering the world. That's why the altar was placed at the east end. That's why the congregation faced east during worship. That's why the dead were buried with their feet pointing east, so that when they rose at the resurrection, they would rise facing the returning Christ. The south represented the Holy Spirit, warmth, light at its fullest, the noonday sun, the glory of God at its zenith. That's why the south wall had the largest windows. The light that entered through the south wall wasn't just illumination, it was divine presence, physical manifestation of spiritual reality. The west represented endings, mortality, the dying of the light. That's why the entrance was on the west end. You entered the church from the direction of death and walked toward the direction of resurrection. Every footstep down the nave was a theological journey from darkness toward light. And the north. The north was where the sun never reached. The direction of permanent shadow. The direction from which, in medieval theology, evil entered the world, the devil's side. Darkness not as the absence of light, but as the presence of something that opposed it. The north wall of a church was the wall that faced the devil. And you didn't put windows in the wall that faced the devil. You didn't create openings. You didn't invite what was out there to look in. You built the north wall solid, blind, sealed, a barrier between the sacred interior and whatever the north represented. As if they were following instructions they didn't fully understand. Now here's where the thread gets strange. Because the association between the north and spiritual danger didn't originate with Christianity. It predates Christianity by millennia. And the deeper I went into pre-Christian traditions, the more I found that the medieval church builders weren't inventing a symbolism. They were inheriting one. And what they inherited was far older than any theology they practiced. In Norse mythology, the north was the direction of Niflheim, the realm of cold, the realm of the dead, the realm that existed before creation and that would persist after destruction. The Norse didn't orient their sacred spaces the way Christians did, but they shared the association between north and death, north and darkness, north and the powers that existed outside the human world. In ancient Egyptian cosmology, the north was associated with the circumpolar stars, the stars that never set, the imperishable ones. The pyramids of Giza have their entrances on the north face. The burial chambers are oriented with shafts pointing north toward the circumpolar stars. The north wasn't evil in Egyptian cosmology. It was the direction of eternity, of the dead who had become immortal. The direction from which the boundary between the living and the dead was thinnest. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision across cultures that had no contact with each other. The north as the direction of the dead. The north as the direction where the boundary between worlds was permeable. The north as the direction that required either special reverence or special protection, depending on the culture's relationship to what lay beyond the boundary. The deeper I went, the more the windowless north wall of the church started to look less like a theological innovation and more like the Christian expression of a pre-Christian understanding that the north side of a sacred space required a barrier. Not insulation, a barrier, a wall between the congregation and something that every culture recognized and that Christianity reframed as the devil, but that older traditions described in terms that were more nuanced, more complex, and more respectful of whatever occupied the northern darkness. Here's where the architecture becomes a text that you can read. Because the medieval church builders weren't just following theological instructions, they were encoding a cosmology into stone. Every feature of the building was a statement about the structure of reality as they understood it. And the windowless north wall was one of the loudest statements. It said, the boundary between the sacred space and the northern darkness must not be breached. Light must not escape northward. Darkness must not enter from the north. The wall must be complete. And here's the detail that most architectural histories skip past. The north door. Many medieval churches had a small door on the north wall, not the main entrance, a secondary door. And this door was used for a specific purpose. It was opened during baptism ceremonies. Specifically, it was opened at the moment in the baptism liturgy when the devil was renounced. The priest would open the north door, symbolically releasing the devil from the person being baptized, casting the evil out through the north wall, through the devil's side, back into the darkness it came from. The door was then closed, sealed, not used for ordinary entry or exit. The north door wasn't an entrance. It was an exit for something that wasn't supposed to be inside. And the fact that the ritual required a door, required an opening that could be temporarily created and then sealed, tells you that the builders understood the north wall as more than a thermal barrier. It was a spiritual barrier, one that could be temporarily breached for a specific ritual purpose and then closed again, like an airlock between two environments that must not be allowed to mix. I'm not telling you the medieval church builders were fighting literal demons through architecture. I'm telling you they believed they were, and I'm telling you that the belief wasn't uniquely Christian. It was a specific Christian expression of a cross-cultural, pre-Christian, possibly prehistoric understanding of directional cosmology that associated the North with the boundary between the living and the dead, between the known and the unknown, between the world of human habitation and whatever exists beyond it. I'm asking why every old church in the Western world was built with one blind wall. I'm asking why the explanation you were given, if you were given one at all, was thermal efficiency, when the documented theological reason is that the north wall was a barrier against spiritual darkness. I'm asking why the most universal feature of medieval sacred architecture, more consistent than any particular style or decorative tradition, is a windowless wall facing the direction that every pre-Christian culture on earth associated with death. I'm asking what the builders knew about the North that we've been taught to dismiss as superstition. What every ancient culture recognized about directional cosmology that modern architecture has discarded. What the blank wall was holding back that was important enough to keep holding back for over 1,000 years of continuous construction tradition. Go find the oldest church near you. Walk to the north side. Stand in front of the blank wall. Feel the difference between that wall and the south wall, with its brilliant windows and its welcoming light. Ask yourself why one side of the building was open to the sky and the other was sealed shut. Ask yourself what the builders were keeping out. Ask yourself why no one told you to look.